Well, I think clearly transparency is very, very important, okay? But I think it's not necessarily clearly understood. So I think the regulator need to identify which are the transparency issues that are actually helpful. Now, for example, recently in Hong Kong, there's this full disclosure with regards to compensation. In the past, it was just in bands, particularly directors. I'm not sure full disclosure is necessarily helpful. One of the problems is that, if your compensation is below, let's say, your peer group, and you happen to be the executive, the implication is that perhaps you're not as good as someone else. So therefore, you would possibly go back to your board and say, by the way, I think I'm performing better than my peer, and I ought to be compensated equal to or better than. And that has a problem escalating compensation. I think this is definitely true in the United States these days. Who would want to be in the third or fourth quadrant in terms of compensation? Because the implication is that you are not as good as the others. So that kind of disclosure sometimes is not necessarily helpful. But we outside shareholders should know, how well these people are compensated relative to some industry norm. And so I think there's got to be some sensible way for this kind of disclosure and transparency.
I would say a lot of those U.S. listed companies, they have already set up the corporate governance committee. For Hong Kong, probably we are one of the pioneers. The terms of reference for our corporate governance committee is to take a close eye on the new development in the market regarding corporate governance requirement, both on the regulator's point of view as well as some initiative among the management in terms of raising the bar. Certainly surpassing the bar is not enough. We have to raise our bar so that we'll keep a very close eye on the global practices, the global trend regarding disclosure, board compensations, corporate governance structure as well, with a view to fitting the company's culture into these trends rather than subscribing the trend directly into the company. One thing probably we have missed out is the board and also the CEO evaluation. This is probably a taboo among listed companies' board as to whether they should scrutinize their performance in a transparent manner. In the States, board and CEO evaluation is a must already. But then in Hong Kong, coming back to the shareholders' structure in Hong Kong, predominantly it is majority controlled by major shareholder or family. So therefore, major shareholder or family member, they have to have the courage and guts to jumpstart with supporting board and also CEO evaluation in order to have in order to achieve the totality and the beauty of corporate governance.
The change which has clearly been considered, which the government has said what originally was going to be in the last legislative programme but it's now expected to be in the next legislative programme, is for part of the listing rules to be subject to statutory requirements and therefore come to the SFC. But that change is going to be very significant, because what that will do is that certain things which are in the listing rules, for which the maximum penalty is public censure. Well, not quite. I think the maximum censure is that the company could be delisted, but that would not normally, that's a nuclear weapon and not something in the regulator's armour which is likely to be used. But under statutory backing, the proposals are for directors to be, and companies to be subject to fines, and individual directors to be subject to banning as directors. That, in a regulatory front, is a very significant change. The rules themselves are not proposed to be changed. In fact, it was made clear that the idea was that the rules would not be changed, but some of the rules would become subject to statutory backing, and that is a very significant difference in the short term. But it's not a change in the requirements; it's a change in the penalty structure.
That's all we have time for today. Today's program has provided much food for thought on where Hong Kong is heading in terms of its corporate governance regime. In the next episode of Corporate Governance in Action, we will be looking at corporate governance in mainland China. See you then.